here. Come on, YouTube. What internet am I on? Should be fine. Cool. Okay, great. That's working. Fantastic. All right, good. Now I can get started. Let me just bring up my slides here. Bum, 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 bum. Hello, Olga, and who is in New Zealand. Very nice to see you. And Levgenia, nice to see you too. Okay, I'm just going to share my screen and then we can get started. So, cool. Hello, everybody. My name is Jay. I'm one of the expert teachers here at E2 Language and now E2 School, which is very cool. I hope you've been enjoying the new platform. It is new. It's not perfect yet. We've still got a lot of work to do, but we're trying to build something that'll be quite revolutionary. We're trying to really build the technology and get all the teaching stuff right so you can learn English, actually learn English online, which would be really cool. What we're going to do today is look at speaking, not necessarily pronunciation. We're going to look at a part of pronunciation. I'll get to that in a second. If you've been following me on YouTube for PT, you would have seen something similar I did over the last few weeks called Speaking Super Science. We're going to do something similar to that, but I've changed it up a little bit. Anyway, let's get started. So let's just think about what speaking is, right? Because speaking has elements of pronunciation, the sounds of the words you say. For example, in English, there are 44 sounds. Your language probably has a similar number of sounds. It seems that languages all have around 40 sounds. English has 44, like ah, eh, I, o, a, b, k, d, f, etc. Right? These are the individual phonemes. Now, your language is going to contrast with some of these. So of these 44 sounds, you can probably say 38 of them perfectly naturally with no trouble whatsoever, because let's just say that f in English and f in Russian is the same, right? But some of the sounds in English you won't have in your first language. So you need to be able to identify what those sounds are so you can begin to focus on those particular sounds to improve them. That's only part of it. That's not all of speaking, of course. There's a lot more to it. There's also what we call clusters of sounds. So not individual sounds, but groups of sounds like pl, tr, cl, sm, or str, for example. Like, for example, place or tree or clothes or small or street, str. You can say the S, the T, and the R are making a cluster. And also at the end of the word, we have like ult and und and fs, etc. So these are the individual sounds combined into clusters. That's another part of speaking and pronunciation. And then this is also another part as well. This is called word stress. So, for example, in English for the word helicopter, the emphasis, the word stress, is on the beginning of the word, on that first syllable, helicopter. We don't say helicopter, that would be wrong because it sounds weird. Instead, we say helicopter. This is kind of a difficult thing because when you see a word, like if you're reading and you see a new word, you do not know where the stress is. It's not until you actually hear that word being spoken that you know that the stress is on that particular syllable. The syllable might be at the beginning, the middle, or the end, and you just don't know until you hear it. There is a way to find this out by looking in the dictionary. That I think it's the Cambridge English Dictionary. They actually have a little symbol that tells you where the stress is. So that's another part of speaking, is word stress. And one thing that I want to talk about in this class, and we'll get to, is the final sounds on words. Because in English grammar, we often change the end of the word, the final sound, to indicate some sort of meaning. For example, if I say I listen versus I listened, d, 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 there's a little sound change. All it is d. And all of a sudden, I have changed the meaning of that verb listen to listened and put it into past tense. So it's incredibly important that when you're speaking, you hit those final sounds correctly. The other one, of course, is he, she, it talks. And the other one is with nouns, one noun, two nouns. So those final sounds. So there are the elements of pronunciation, but then there's more, because then there's the how you combine all of the sounds into spoken language. Let's just call it rhythm. So in rhythm, you have sentence stress, which I'll show you in a minute. You have chunking, which I'll also show you in a minute, and you have connected speech. And that's what we're going to look at in today's class. Let's firstly do a little warm up though. This particular sound, the and th, is very problematic for a lot of people learning English. For example, I know Italians often say f, for example. I'll give you 15 seconds. I just want you to read through this sentence out loud, please. Cool. All right. Now I'm going to appear while I read this. So they thankfully think this thing is the best thing that they can throw the 3 times they need to throw a thing. Th, 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 th. This is a problem sound. Let's do another one. No. I'll give you 15 seconds to prepare, actually, and then I'll give you 15 seconds to read through. So these are individual sentences. Here you go. Prepare to read now. So this is another sound that is problematic in English. It's the l, r sound. Let's read it again. Let me go first and then you can try. Ready? Jerry's jelly berries taste really rare. Rory's lawn rake rarely rakes really right. A really leery Larry rolls readily to the road. The road's load is less than lightly. Lassie Lily likes Ronnie's rulers. You try. Okie dokie. Now, this one is for anyone from South Asia, India, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Pakistan. The were. This is very problematic for a lot of people whose first language is Hindi or Marathi or Malayalam or Urdu or something like that. The were. So I'll go first and then I'll let you practice. Here we go. We went to Wally's volleyball event under the village's wilted willow with victory in mind. Wally would win the volley versus Vinny. You try. All right. One more time. Try one more time. Here we go. 3, 2, 1. Okay, let me try again. Just again, for those South Asian people. We went to Wally's volleyball event under the village's wilted willow with victory in mind. Wally would win the volley versus Vinny. So it's the difference between using your lips, what, and using your top teeth on your bottom lips, what, v. Anyway, so that might be an example of a particular sound that you find difficult in English, like the w, v thing. All right. Now I'm going to take you through 5, I think there are 5 or 6 different sort of, let's call them keys as to how you can speak more clearly in English, but we're not going to focus on the sounds. Well, word stress a little bit. We're more going to focus on those rhythmic elements of spoken language, which can help you a lot, okay? So we'll start with word stress because this is sort of pronunciation. For example, here are some examples. If you have a single syllable, remember a syllable is just a sound, a unit of, how can I say this? It's so confusing. It's just weird. Anyway, dog, the emphasis is just on the whole thing, of course. But then if you have a two-syllable word like robot, 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 the emphasis is on the first syllable. And you might have a three-syllable word like fantastic, fantastic, fantastic. And the emphasis is on the middle syllable. Helicopter, as we saw before, has emphasis or stress on the first syllable. And personality, personality. Just repeat after me. Dog, robot, fantastic, helicopter, personality. Cool. So hopefully you hit the emphasis here on these particular syllables. Now, I want you to listen to how I say this and tell me which one is correct. Do I say climate or do I say climate? Is it A or B? Is it climate or is it climate? Where is the emphasis? Is it on the first syllable or the second syllable? Number two, do I say democracy, democracy, or democracy? Where is the emphasis? Where is the correct word stress here? Again, is it A, democracy, B, democracy, or C, democracy? Where should I put emphasis? Which is correct? And number three, is it experimental or is it experimental? Experimental or experimental? Which is correct, A or B? Cool. Hopefully you got climate, democracy, and experimental. You can see how important it is to stress the correct syllable so the word sounds natural. Because if you're putting stress on the wrong syllable, the person listening to you will, well, they'll struggle to understand what you say. And it's funny because if you're speaking to somebody and they're stressing the wrong syllable, the word stress is wrong, you can still understand them, but your brain just takes a few little microseconds to go, huh? What? If there's somebody saying, for example, something about democracy, and you're like, oh, democracy, I can still, it just takes me a split second. Anyway, so that's word stress. Let's look at sentence stress. This is a little bit different. Well, it's a lot different actually. So here, what we can do is we can emphasize a particular word in a sentence to sort of give it additional meaning. For example, somebody might say to me, hey, Jay, who's driving to the cinema tonight? And I'll say, oh, John will drive to the cinema tonight, putting emphasis on the person there. Or somebody might say, hey, is John sick, right? He's not coming to the cinema tonight. And I'll say, no, John will drive to the cinema tonight. Will. I put emphasis on the will aspect of the sentence. Or somebody says, hey, is John going to ride his bicycle to the cinema tonight? And I say, no, John will drive to the cinema tonight. So again, what I'm doing is sort of confirming meaning or adding some additional meaning here by stressing a particular word in the sentence. Let's look at D. John will drive to the cinema tonight, not the restaurant. Or E. John will drive to the cinema tonight, not this afternoon. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a quiz. I'm going to emphasize one of these. Please tell me if it's A, B, C, D, or E. Ready? John will drive to the cinema tonight. Which one did I just emphasize? Which one did you hear? Good. Everybody got that? That's pretty straightforward. I emphasized tonight slightly, very, very slightly, but it's enough to shift the meaning of the sentence, right? Cool. Okay, this one gets a little bit harder. This is where it actually becomes really difficult. How can I say this? All right. Look at this paragraph here. Let's imagine you had to read this paragraph out aloud, okay? There's no way to visualize where to pause and how to chunk certain words together. So what we don't do is we don't read like this. Does it really matter whether people speak with an accent? I sound like a computer, right? You know, when you hear the computer speaking English and it says it word by word and it sounds very strange. It sounds like a robot. We don't want to do that. We also don't want to have weird chunking where I say like, does it really matter whether people speak with an accent as, because that it makes the meaning so difficult to understand because it's just not natural to chunk that way. You can have weird chunking. And you also don't want to do this. Does it really matter whether people speak with an accent as long as they can be easily understood? Because that doesn't help convey meaning either. So what we need to do is we need to think about where we pause in order to emphasize particular meaning. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read this now. Listen to where I pause and listen to how I group words together, and then I'll give you a chance to do it in a second. For example, does it really matter whether people speak with an accent as long as they can be easily understood? Many people now believe that in an increasingly globalized world, we should accept variations in pronunciation, that is, accent. However, there's no point in speaking with an accent if people can't understand you. Is there? Cool, your turn. You have 30 seconds to read out loud and pause correctly. Cool. So when we're pausing there, we're just pausing for like a split second, maybe less than a second. Does it really matter whether people speak with an accent as long as they can be easily understood? 1, 2, maybe like a second or 2 max. But what that allows the listener to do is to process your spoken language. Because if you just speak rapidly at somebody, my brain doesn't have enough time to process the meaning. I need you to sort of give me slight pauses. I'm not that quick. You say nobody is. I need you to give me slight pauses so I can actually extract the meaning and move on. So just be conscious when you're speaking. Here's the other thing that you need to keep in mind. Fluency does not equal speed. So the quicker you speak does not mean the more fluently you speak, right? Fluency has many different elements. For example, pausing and chunking and sentence stress, and we're going to look at connected speech in a second. These are elements of fluency, to be fluent in a language. Being fluent doesn't just mean you speak really quickly, okay? There's that element where you don't have to search for vocabulary and you don't have to think about grammar, for example, but certainly pausing is a part of fluency. All right, let's look at connected speech because this is probably the most difficult element of spoken language, especially when you're listening. So what we do in English is sometimes we link words together. For example, if I said to you, I had an egg for breakfast, that would be weird because I don't speak like that naturally. What I would say is, this morning I had an egg for breakfast. An egg, an egg, an egg, an egg, an egg? What's an egg? I don't know what an egg is. Maybe it's a new type of egg. I'm not sure. But that's what we do. An egg. I had an egg for breakfast, right? So all of a sudden the N joins this word here. Sometimes we can also add extra sounds, like if I say true or false, true or false, true or false, you might actually hear a weird little W sound that, well, it just shouldn't be there. But because when we combine those words, it just naturally appears, which is quite strange. And sometimes we just delete sounds altogether. So in written English, it would say used to, I used to smoke cigarettes. But when I speak, it's very difficult to put a d and a t sound together. So I just say used to. I used to smoke cigarettes. And then that kind of makes it hard because I don't know if I'm talking about past tense or anything like this, but this is just how native English speakers speak. Sometimes we delete sounds. Sometimes we create entirely new sounds when we combine words like don't you. Don't you know this song? Don't you know? Don't ch, ch, ch. There's no CH in you, is there? No, there's not. And also sometimes we combine the same sounds. So if we have a word that ends in L, for example, like social, and the following word begins with L sound, then what we do is we actually just combine it into one. I say, hey, do you have a good social life? Social life, social life. I don't say social life. It's too difficult. I say social life. So these are elements of connected speech. So have a look at this. This is the paragraph that we read before. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read it very slowly to you through the red parts, and you'll hear the way that I actually combine words together, how other sounds appear, how I delete out some sounds. For example, I might say, does it really matter whether people speak with an accent as long as they can be easily understood? Many people now believe that in an increasingly globalized world, we should accept variations in pronunciation, that is accent. However, there's no point in speaking with an accent if people can't understand you, is there? Whoa, weird, right? So in fact, if we were to write English as it sounds, this is how we would write it. But we certainly don't. The written English looks very different to how it's spoken. So let me just read this one more time at a normal tempo and see if you can pick up on the connected speech elements. Does it really matter whether people speak with an accent as long as they can be easily understood? Many people now believe that in an increasingly globalized world, we should accept variations in pronunciation, that is accent. However, there's no point in speaking with an accent if people can't understand you, is there? So when I read that, I was doing all of those connected speech things. I want you to try this. I'm going to give you 60 seconds, so you have lots of time. And I really want you to spend some time thinking, does it? I want you to slow down on the red parts and read it like this. Okay, you have lots of time. Slow down on the red parts, please. All right, cool. This is particularly apparent, connected speech, when we merge all of the sounds together in very common phrases. So for example, I would never say, what did you get up to on the weekend? What did you get up to? I would say, if I'm speaking to my friends, I would say, what did you get up to on the weekend? What did you get up to on the weekend, right? That's weird. It's just, there's actually very little similarity between the written, what you would see, and what you hear. What did you get up to on the weekend? What did you get up to on the weekend? So that's common in in common phrases. Cool. Let's have a look at final sounds. This is actually an element of pronunciation in terms of the sounds, and this is critical. As I mentioned before, in English, a lot of our grammar, a lot of our meaning is attached to the final sound of words. For example, you know past tense verbs, right? Like wanted and hoped and played. In fact, these are quite strange because listen to the way these words finish. This one makes an id sound, this one makes a t sound, and this one makes a d sound. Wanted, wanted, hoped, 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 played, played, played. So even though these all indicate past tense with the ed or d, the sound is in fact very different. Id, t, d. Also in English, he, she, it eats, sits, and knows. It's important that you get that right. And also nouns, 1 cup, 2 cups, 1 spoon, 700 spoons, 1 plate, 1,000 plates. So it's important that you hit that S sound on the end of not only plural nouns like this, but also on those third person singular verbs, he, she, it eats. So these are critical. So let's do a little bit of practice here. You can see in these sentences there are some final sounds which are really important to the meaning of these sentences. For example, I visited my grandparents 2 days ago. I visited my grandparents 2 days ago. Joe listens to rap artists. Tom flicked the lights on. Let's do it again. Visited, grandparents, days, listens, artists, flicked, lights. You have 30 seconds to practice these. Okie dokie. How did you go? I know that some languages, a lot of Southeast Asian languages, Vietnamese comes to mind, Thai, Bahasa, Indonesian, Malayu. Some of these languages, Cambodian, you guys tend to sort of cut the final sound off your word. You speak very much in syllables. It's a syllable timed language, I'm guessing, whereas in English it's not. So it's important that you make sure your mouth says these sounds, even if it feels weird, like saying days or grandparents, stuff like that. Cool. All right, let's look at what I think is a bit of a key here. It does depend on you, A, knowing the 44 sounds of English, B, knowing those consonant clusters like the cl and the dr and the br, for example, and then knowing all of those things that I've just told you about chunking and pausing and sentence stress and connected speech. The critical thing here is when you speak, you want to try to speak with meaning. And this is a strange phenomenon because this isn't necessarily physiological. It's not your mouth or your tongue or anything like that. It's actually sort of, I don't even know what it is. It's more like a sensation that what you're saying has purpose and meaning to it, okay? So what I'm going to do now is I'll firstly just read this without meaning. I'll just say the words, okay? I'm just going to say words. And you'll notice that you can't really understand what I'm saying because I'm just saying words. I'm also going to drop out some of those other critical elements. I could say, does it really matter whether people speak with an accent as long as they can be easily understood? I can't not speak with meaning. It's a bit problematic. Many people now believe that in an increasingly globalized world, we should accept variations. All right, and now I'll do it with meaning when I actually try and convey meaning across. Does it really matter whether people speak with an accent as long as they can be easily understood? Many people now believe that in an increasingly globalized world, we should accept variations in pronunciation, that is accent. However, there's no point in speaking with an accent if people can't understand you, is there? Your turn. Cool. How did you go? I think that's all. That's the end of my little presentation there. What we're going to do over the next few weeks, though, is we're sort of experimenting as we build out E2 School / E2 Language. We're going to be delivering more and more live classes. So please feel free to register for these live classes. They will be for free. And we're going to try to sort of learn how to teach pronunciation via Zoom or via the computer or via YouTube Live. So if you're not yet a subscriber to our E2 School YouTube channel, do click subscribe. And if you haven't yet signed up to E2 School, please do, because you can register for the live classes. They're free. And there's also courses there on pronunciation called SpeakingLab. There's a course on grammar called Words and Rules. And there's also a free course called Test Ready, which is a sort of vocabulary building course rather for IELTS and PTE, for example. Yeah, cool. Anyway, I hope that was helpful. If you have any questions, pop them into the chat. I'll also check the YouTube Live questions as well. Just give me a second to find them. Cool. Samara says, will this class be uploaded as recorded class? I don't think we have the capacity on E2 School to upload them, but I'm not sure. You'll have to check. Tatiana, thank you for the great work. Thank you, Tatiana, for coming along. Mayor, thank you. Cool. No, everyone seems pretty happy. Maybe no questions. It's tricky. Speaking honestly is a really weird science. It's a really weird science because basically what we're doing is just making sounds like with our mouths like animals or something, but for some reason you can understand me, which is really strange. It's the nature of language, more than the sum of its parts. Cool. All right, I'll leave you there. Thank you very much for coming. I hope it was somewhat helpful, and yeah, we'll get better at doing this, and that'll be cool. Ta-ta.